Hello, young instructors or old instructors. I don't think anybody really cares. But if you're here, that means you probably have questions about this flight instructor stuff. You know, this material is just not the easiest to kind of go about and learn. It traditionally in the flight training community, when we want to know something, we just basically go out and we ask somebody, hey, show me how to do this or something. But these FOIs, these regulations, these endorsements, these things are what actually are the backbones, the meat and potatoes of actually being an instructor. And in order to be a really proficient instructor, you really can't unless you know these things. Just because you can actually teach someone how to do something doesn't mean that you're not going to get yourself in trouble with the FAA. And they're the ones that really want you to know this stuff because they're the ones that do the certification for these ratings, with the exception of the few DPEs out there in the world who do this job. Okay, so today, just absolutely most common request that I have is what you see here on the screen, which is in regulations. I have, excuse me, I have the regulations that brought up in two parts here. The one is where you actually see on the left-hand side of the screen over here, in which we actually have all the regulations listed in Part 61. And then over here, it's just basically the breakdown. I'll be working between some tabs over here to kind of show you where I'm coming from and why I want my students to learn this stuff, my CFI applicants, why I want them to learn this particular material the way that I teach it. Now, the good thing about regs is that not all regulations are going to apply to you, which means that when you set this big, thick-ass book in front of you, you know, everybody's like, oh my God, look at that big, thick-ass book. And you're like, no, well, not everything in that thick-ass book belongs, you know, you don't have to know everything in that. Well, you guess you know what type of book it is now. And so that's the biggest thing is, how do you actually know what you have to know? Well, the only way you would really know is to actually just read down through it. But, you know, ain't nobody got time for that. So let's talk about what we need to know. So here's everything that we have, and depends on if you're going to be working from which standpoint you're going to be working from. If you're going to be working from your initial instructor is single engine, then you have a little bit more to know. If your initial instructor is going to be multi-engine, then a little less to know. And the reason why is because as a single engine instructor, you actually have to know about recreational pilots, which I don't know. I really don't know any recreational pilots at all. At all, period. I've never even done any training for a recreational pilot. I mean, I know how to do it. It's in the regs. It's pretty easy, but I don't know. If anybody ever meets one, take a picture. I think they're like a leprechaun or something. Anyway, so with this, why is there a difference? Why do the single engine instructors have to do it, but multi-engine instructors do not? Well, if you're a multi-engine instructor initial, and you're going to be doing nothing but multi-engine instructing, well, there are not any multi-engine recreational airplanes. There you go. That's the reason why they don't have to know it. So they got it a little bit easier than you guys have it for the single engine initial. So here we have Part 61. We have Subpart A, which is general. So I like the general rules. You know, there's a couple regs you have to know for parts that you have to know for, which is Part 61, Part 91, Part FAR Part 1, and NTSB Part 830. The main difference. The main two are, of course, the Part 61 and 91. And what is the difference? What's the main difference there? Well, Part 61 is all the way that you can get certificated as a pilot or as an instructor. And Part 91 is all the ways that the FAA can take that shit away from you. So if you want to know all the things not to do, go to Part 91, and that'll help you out. Okay, let's move along here because I want to make this as short as possible today. Everybody's attention span is probably at around somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes, and I think I'm already going over that. So we have Subpart A, General. Then if you scroll down, we have Aircraft Ratings and Pilot Authorizations. The only one we ever use in this one is just this 61, 63 here. We use that. We're not going to touch the 61, 65 because that's instrument rating, and we don't really do any of this other crap in here. So just one reg out of there. And then student pilots, a lot, everything in there belongs to you. It's going to be in your head by the time you go to check ride. Recreational pilots, only the single engine guys got to know that. And no, for the multi-engine people, yeah, if you just never crank the other engine, no, you're not a single engine instructor. Okay, so just relax on that. Private pilots, commercial pilots, we don't do ATP stuff because ATP is a self-endorsed rating, so instructors are really not involved with that. The only time an instructor is ever involved with the ATP rating is if a person has failed an initial ATP check ride and they have to get retrained. That's the only type of time that ever comes into play. And then lastly is subpart H. We're not going to talk about ground instructors, and we I'm sure not going to talk about these people here, these sport pilot people. We don't talk about those at all. Anyway, sorry about clearing my throat there. I'll try to edit that out. If I don't, just deal with it. This is all good stuff, I think. So we're going to go through here. We're going to talk about all these particular ones. Now over here I have this stuff brought up because we got to know. We're just going to go through each one and kind of talk about each one in general. And what do we want to know? How do we want to memorize this particular material? Well, we're going to start here on 61.1, so you can see it's right there. Applicability and definitions, and this basically says who does Part 61 apply to? And so it says except as provided in Part 107 of this chapter. Part 107 is your unmanned operators, your drone operators. So none of the stuff in Part 61, or actually a lot of the stuff in Part 61, doesn't apply to the Part 107 guys. You may be a Part 107 person. You may have your certificate already. If you don't, get with a CFI or something, and they can get it for you. It's just a quick thing online. If you need more information about that, just drop me a comment below, and I'll explain to you how you do it. So 61.1, applicability and definitions. Basically, who does this apply to? Well, it applies to anybody for the who's training for the issuing of a pilot, flight instructor, ground instructor certificate, and that's basically it. One of the things in here that I think that you should know is like Aeronautical Experience, all these definitions here. I would be familiar with them. For you complex guys, for those who are don't know what the word complex means, this is a big one too, because on each rating you have to fly with a single engine or multi-engine. You have to fly a complex airplane. It says a complex airplane means an airplane that has retractable landing gear, flaps, and a controllable pitch prop, including airplanes equipped with a digital end control system like the DA-42 Twin Star. So the question I ask on this as an examiner is a Learjet a complex airplane? And the answer is no, it's not a complex airplane. So on your back of your pilot certificate, you're able to have a specific category of aircraft, a class of aircraft, and a type of aircraft. A type rating, when you get a type rating, it covers every bit of that stuff. So a Learjet does not have a controllable pitch propeller, and so we can't call a jet that. So it's not a complex airplane. Why? Why don't you need a complex endorsement to fly it? Well, because it's not a complex airplane, and because the type rating covers it. And there you go. Now here's a big one here. This little definition here is really one that is very diverse across the DPE community and aviation safety inspectors. All these guys think they know something, but they don't know. A lot of them just they're so behind in the times, and they just really don't know what they're talking about. But if you look at the definition for these particular things, here is the controversy. Cross-country time, in every single rating, it doesn't matter what you have, it is a 50 nautical miles. The only exception to that rule would be a sport pilot. A sport pilot is 25 miles. Now, we're not going to get into rotorcraft and everything else. We're just listen to me when I tell you that everything is 50 nautical miles when it comes to cross-country time. And if you scroll down here, it says, like, for the purpose of the aeronautical experience requirements for a private pilot, commercial pilot, instrument rating, blah, blah, blah. And then if you scroll down, it says, sport pilot is 25 miles. And you go down, it'll say private pilot is 50 miles, and commercial pilot is 50 miles. So that's what this is basically saying. There are some examiners out there who would argue the point and say that for a student pilot, a cross-country is 25 miles. We'll talk about that particular point specifically when we get into 61.93. There will be a particular video on the 6187 reg, a dedicated video to 6187, a dedicated video to 6193, and a dedicated video to the private pilot regulations, which is 61103 to 61113. So we'll have a dedicated video for those, and so just be looking for those. I'll have those published, and as soon as I can get them out on the market. So anytime that you have definition, you always go to Part 1 first. If you can't find it in Part 1, if you have a question about something involved in Part 61, you'd go to Definitions of Part 61, and it has the same one for Part 91 as well. Everything in here, like, hey, if I grab ground training, what does that mean? You know, well, that's anything other than flight training. So this is where you would go to find all the regs. And of course, if I scroll down through here, you can see there's a lot of crap, but we only need to know just those couple things. 61.2, exercise of privileges. This particular saying is saying that no person may exercise the privileges of anything they have or certificate or rating that has been surrendered, suspended, revoked, or expired. So this is kind of like a duh, saying that you have to have your stuff with you and you must be current in order for you to operate, to exercise your privileges of your pilot certificate. 61.3, some of you may have an acronym in your head called PEM, Pilot Certificate, Government Issued Photo ID, Unexpired, and a current medical required for the operations that you're trying to do. It's like for a private pilot, you need to have at least a third class, and commercial must have at least a second class, and of course ATP must have at least a first class. So this is where it tells you here that you need those requirements for to operate those things is in here. Also goes in, tells you, if you're operating under that new rule, what you must have with you. But photo ID, government issued photo ID is the big thing. What is an ID? Well, ID is like something that has your birth date. It has a picture on it and stuff like that. So, would a library card work? No, it wouldn't. And the reason for is because it must be issued by the federal government, a state, or the District of Columbia. So local governments don't actually work for this particular requirement. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff down here. One of the things here is, medical certificate, you have to have it, but who's not required to have it? Well, the one person that's not required to have a medical is a student pilot while they're training. And another thing is a flight instructor. Now, a flight instructor who is not acting as pilot in command, who's only flight instructing, is not required to have a current medical. So it's a good thing, because if you ever lose your medical, could you still flight instruct? And the answer is yes. You just can't act in a capacity where you have to act as pilot in command. So that's good stuff there. Now we're going to scroll on down here. There's the flight instructor specific thing. And we'll scroll down here. That's basically all you need to know for that, because none of you guys are. Well, I take that back. If you're going through the traditional course in which you've got your private instrument commercial, probably nobody is going to fall underneath category 2 and 3 junk. That is for these big time pilots who fly these aircraft that are capable of executing these Category 2 and Category 3 approaches, and that's just not us right now. So we're going to keep on scrolling down here. You see there's a lot of stuff, but it doesn't apply to you. So we're going down to 61.4, Qualifications and Approval of Flight Simulators and Flight Training Devices. It's just basically saying here that you can't use it unless it's been qualified by certified by the FAA. No big deal. Doesn't have anything to do with you. I would just wipe it from my memory. 61.5 is a recap of what they do under Part 61, saying that under Part 61 you can get all this stuff. And that's it. So don't try to take this for too much granted as, for what it is. It's just very short. We can keep going fast if you just listen to me and memorize what I tell you to memorize. 61.7, obsolete certificates and ratings. Look what the date is this stuff. It's way back here. Free balloon pilot, and that doesn't apply to us. A pilot certificate that bears any of the following categories of rating. May not exercise privileges, So this is old stuff. And we don't care about obsolete certificate and ratings because we're looking at new ratings. And the odds of us going through some of these particular ones, we're not going to really have to deal with, because here's the rub. Why would you say, well, okay, Todd, why wouldn't I need to deal with it? Well, here's the deal. If you have any questions, you just contact a FSDO. Okay? You don't sit there and try to read the regs and work it out on your own like an idiot. You're going to contact the FSDO and you're going to say, look, I got this thing, this guy with the guy in the thing, hey, whatever. You contact the FSDO. I'm going to do the whole entire lesson like this from now on. I think it sounds a little bit tougher. 61.8, inapplicability of unmanned aerial. We don't care about this, at Part 107 junk. Part 61.9, of course, reserved, don't need. Now this is expired pilot certificates and reissuance of 61.11. So these people that you see here deal with a different type of pilot certificate. Back in the day, we had paper pilot certificates. Anyway, the bottom line, those pilot certificates, the last day you could exercise those was back in 2010. If a person comes to you nowadays and they have a paper pilot certificate, or if they have something that's not green plastic, contact the FSDO. Don't try to interpret it yourself. You're not a professional in that aspect. Once you get with the FSDO and you learn a little bit more, then you can do something else. But don't try to figure it out yourself. If it's not a green piece of plastic like you have in your pocket, contact the FSDO. 6113, issuance of Airman certificates, rating, and authorizations. Well, this is when you're actually applying for any Airman certificate, rating, or authorizations. It says you must make that in a manner acceptable to the administrator. Does anyone know what the manner is for applying? Yeah, it's IACRA. So if you don't have an IACRA, then you have to do a paper 8710 application. However, when you do a check ride, when you send someone for a check ride, you always want to make sure you have an 8710 IACRA paper backup available, signed by both you and the student and dated correctly. You don't want your dates on your endorsements to be different from your dates on your 8710 application. That just looks weird, and if that be the case, one may expire before the other, and there's a problem there with actually taking the check ride. So please make sure that when you send someone for a check ride, that the date on the 8710 matches the date of the endorsement in the logbook. That way their expiration date is the same. And so let's see here. Nothing really else down here. Again, Category 2, Category 3. So we can keep on scrolling. Offenses involving alcohol and drugs. A conviction for the violation has to be reported. A conviction for the violation must be reported. However, don't make the mistake of when you do your Med Express, your Med Express thing. You guys know what that is? You guys, girls know what that is? Yeah, you do. Ask a question on there about the same line of questioning, but it doesn't say conviction. What does it say? Well, it says, have you ever been arrested? And so, a lot of you have. So don't allow yourself to fall victim there. Here it's a conviction. The other part is just a arrest, which is a Med Express. So don't lie on that. Talking to one of my aviation lawyer friends the other day, and he said that's probably one of the biggest things going around now is people getting busted on that because they have got arrested. And for the offenses involving alcohol or drugs. Because we have a lot of drunks in our community as pilots. It's a very high-stress job. And frankly, a drink before a flight helps calm my nerves. I'm joking. Don't let that go beyond this video. Jesus Christ, that's going to ruin me as a pilot there. Anyway, refusal submit. If you refuse to blow, you will get in trouble. So don't do it. And if you do it and the FAA finds out about it, well, that is denial of an application of a certificate rating and also grounds for suspension or revocation. So bottom line is, don't drink and drive. Uber is much more cheaper than losing $60,000 worth of pilot certificates or $70,000 worth of pilot certificates. So don't be an idiot. Temporary certificates. So temporary certificate is good for 120 days. At the end of 120 days, if you don't have your pilot certificate and your plastic pilot certificate in hand, then you need to get with your DPE or get with the FSDO and have them help you. Don't wait till 120 days, okay? At about 90 days, I would start worrying. About 75 days, I'd probably start worrying because you don't want to get down to the last minute. Security disqualification. This deals with the TSA ruling. If the TSA identifies you as a threat, it's going to be a while before you can get released from TSA's threat assessment review. So I would make sure that if you have someone that has maybe a very similar name to someone who is a threat, well, you know what? There's just nothing you can do. So the only thing you can do is send their information up. That's probably one of the biggest things, though, where TSA finds it a threat. The names are the names are the same. You know, they look at the TSA looks at the name first, really, and it bounces against a computer, and that's how they see if that's going to happen. But if a person has a security disqual, if they already have any type of certificate, the FAA will suspend it, and that's what you need to know about that. Duration of pilot and instructor certificates and privileges. So the first pilot certificate that we had to know was a temporary certificate, and that's 120. 120 days is a temporary pilot certificate. The next thing is a student pilot certificate. So how long is a student pilot certificate? Well, if some of you still have a student pilot certificate, and you'd have no other certificates, or I should say if your client has a student pilot certificate that's on paper, it mimics that of a third-class medical. So if they were under 40 when they got it, it's good for 60 calendar months. If they were over 40 when they got it, it's going to be 24 calendar months. So if they have a paper student pilot certificate, they can get a plastic one, but they don't need to, especially if they're getting close to a check ride. A paper student pilot certificate would be valid, but it mimics the third class. Now, the next one would be, what if they have a plastic student pilot certificate? If they have a plastic student pilot certificate, it's issued without a specific expiration date. What about a regular pilot certificate? Well, it's also issued without a specific expiration date, but there you have to maintain your currency. So if you don't have a flight review, then technically that certificate is not valid. Flight instructors certificates are good for 24 months and must be renewed every 24 months. They are a totally piece of plastic different from your pilot certificate. So I've had people tell me, yeah, I got my flight instructor certificate in. What should I do with my commercial pilot certificate? I'm like, well, you need to keep it because you can't operate as a flight instructor unless you have your commercial pilot certificate. So don't trash your commercial pilot certificate when you get your flight instructor certificate in, because it's two separate pieces of plastic. So, if you did it all after June of 2016, you may have a student pilot certificate, a private instrument, a private multi add-on, or multiple different pieces of plastic. Keep those for nostalgia reasons. That's fine too. But over a period of time, you may actually end up having 4 or 5 different pieces of plastic. You can also get a ground instructor certificate. So once you actually go and take some of these instructor tests, I highly recommend you take your AGI, Advanced Ground Instructor Certificate. Highly recommend you do that, because at the end of your 2 years, when you get ready to renew your flight instructor certificate, you can apply for something called a gold seal. So that's going to make sure that happens. All right, so we're going to stop here. We're going to come back on 61.21, and we're going to go from there the next time, because this is a little bit too long, and we'll break this up into a couple of parts. We'll pick up right here on 61.23 because this doesn't apply. Anyway, thanks very much for following along with me, and hopefully you'll have time to study this particular video here, and when you've got this down pat, come to the next one. We'll see you soon. I'm Todd Shelnut for CFI Pro. See ya.